A new report has found that private conservation across Australia has reduced the threat of extinction for more than 70 nationally threatened species. For 20 years, the private conservation organisation Bush Heritage Australia has managed habitats, and the results have been more than encouraging.
Somewhere in Western Australia, a quiet laboratory has crossed a line, creating a creature that will never grow up, engineered to remain a baby forever with one purpose: to erase its own kind before they're ever born.
Keeping laboratory animals like rats for use in experiments is an expensive process for researchers.
It sounds like science fiction or a moral nightmare. But after nearly a century of losing a war against an invasive species so toxic it can kill a crocodile,
goannas, quolls, snakes, even freshwater crocs are dying from the toad's toxin in as little as 15 minutes.
Australia is running out of options. So what happens when conventional conservation fails? With 200 million invaders tearing through ecosystems found nowhere else on Earth, scientists have turned to radical solutions: genetic sabotage, engineered cannibalism, and biological barriers carved into the desert. This is not just a fight for wildlife. It's a high-stakes experiment in how far humanity is willing to go to prevent ecological collapse.
Insects, the tiny engines of Earth's ecosystems, are mysteriously falling silent, and that sound is being heard as a stark warning for humanity's future.
At Ground Zero, Queensland, 1935. To understand how Australia found itself at war with a toad, we need to travel back to 1935, to the sweltering sugar plantations of Queensland, where a few desperate farmers made a decision that would haunt the entire continent for generations. Nobody could have predicted what would happen next. Nobody could have imagined that a simple attempt to save some crops would unleash one of the greatest ecological disasters in modern history. In those days, sugar was king in northern Australia. The industry was booming, generating more than 20% of all farming value in Queensland alone. Massive plantations stretched across the tropical landscape, and the men who owned them wielded enormous power. These sugar barons had built empires from the sticky white crystals, and they would do absolutely anything to protect their investments. Their fortunes depended on it. Their legacies depended on it. And when a threat emerged from beneath the soil, they responded with the kind of reckless urgency that only desperation can produce. The enemy was called the greyback cane beetle, and it was destroying everything. These insects laid their eggs in the ground, and when the larvae hatched, they burrowed into the roots of sugarcane plants and devoured them from the inside out. Entire fields were collapsing. Yields plummeted by as much as 40% in the hardest-hit areas. Farmers watched helplessly as their crops withered and died, their profits evaporating under the relentless assault of an insect they could barely see. They tried pesticides. They tried manual removal. Nothing worked. The beetles kept coming, and the farmers grew more desperate by the day. Then word reached Australia about a miracle solution from the other side of the world. Reports from Puerto Rico and Hawaii spoke of a large toad from South America that supposedly devoured beetles with an insatiable appetite. Farmers in those regions claimed the toads had saved their crops, turning infested fields into productive plantations almost overnight. It sounded too good to be true, and as it turned out, it was. Without conducting proper laboratory tests, without running field trials, without consulting ecologists, or considering the potential consequences, Australia made its fateful decision. In 1935, officials imported 102 cane toads from Hawaii and released them into the wild near Gordon Vale in Queensland. The farmers celebrated, and they believed their problems were over. They had no idea they had just planted the seeds of a catastrophe that would still be unfolding nearly a century later. Every single cane toad in Australia today, all 200 million of them, descends from that original group of just 102 individuals. Here is the cruel irony that makes this tragedy even more painful. The toads never actually ate the beetles they were brought to destroy. The greyback cane beetles spent most of their time high up on sugarcane stalks, completely out of reach for the ground-dwelling toads. The two species barely even encountered each other. Instead of hunting beetles, the toads discovered something far easier.
They'll eat spiders, scorpions, rodents, snakes, fish, and just about anything else that passes in front of them.
Everything else. They ate insects of all kinds. They ate small mammals. They ate native frogs and lizards. They raided bird nests and swallowed eggs whole. They consumed anything and everything that could fit into their enormous mouths. And while they feasted on Australia's native wildlife, the beetles they were supposed to eliminate continued destroying crops as if nothing had changed. But the real horror was not what the toads ate. It was what happened to everything that tried to eat them. Cane toads are not like the harmless frogs you might find in your garden. They are walking chemical weapons, carrying enough poison to kill almost any predator foolish enough to attack them. Behind their heads sit two large glands that produce a milky white substance packed with toxins so powerful they can stop a heart in minutes. When Australian predators encountered these new arrivals, they did what predators always do. They tried to eat them, and then they died. By the thousands, by the millions. And the invasion had begun. The logic of extinction. What followed was nothing short of biological annihilation. The cane toads spread outward from Queensland like a slow-moving tsunami of death, and everywhere they went, the native wildlife collapsed. The numbers tell a story so devastating that it is almost impossible to comprehend. In some areas, 70% of freshwater crocodiles were wiped out within just a few years of the toads arriving. These ancient reptiles, survivors of the age of dinosaurs, had never encountered anything like this before. They saw the toads as easy prey, snapped them up without hesitation, and died with their jaws still clamped around the toxic bodies. Entire populations vanished from rivers and billabongs that had supported them for millions of years. Monitor lizards suffered even worse. And these massive prehistoric-looking reptiles, some of them stretching over 6 feet in length, had been apex predators in the Australian bush for countless generations. They feared nothing. They ate everything. And when the toads arrived, the monitors did exactly what their instincts told them to do. They attacked. In region after region, the results were catastrophic. 90% of monitor lizards vanished from many areas. Entire species teetered on the edge of extinction. The great hunters of the outback were being wiped out by a creature that weighed less than a kilogram. Even the most venomous snakes in Australia proved helpless against this invader. The brown snake, famous for its deadly bite and aggressive temperament, can kill a human in under an hour. But when a brown snake strikes a cane toad, the snake is the one that dies.
They contain the deadly bufotoxin in their skin, and any of our native animals that go and eat one of these toads will pretty much die.
The poison works so fast that researchers have documented brown snakes dying in less than 30 minutes after biting a toad. The snake's venom, one of the most potent in the world, is useless against the toad's chemical defenses. It is like watching a championship boxer knocked out by an opponent who never even threw a punch. And the poison does not just exist in adult toads. This is what makes the invasion so utterly devastating. The toxin saturates every single stage of the cane toad's life cycle. The eggs are toxic. The tadpoles are toxic. The tiny juveniles that have just transformed from tadpoles are toxic. There is no safe window, no vulnerable moment when a predator can safely attack. If a fish eats toad eggs floating in a pond, that fish dies. If a small lizard gobbles up a tadpole, that lizard dies. So if a bird swallows a juvenile toad no bigger than a fingernail, that bird dies. The entire food chain has been poisoned from top to bottom. The reproductive capacity of these invaders makes the situation even more hopeless. A single female cane toad can lay up to 30,000 eggs at once, and she can do this twice a year when conditions are favorable. Do the math and the numbers become terrifying. Billions of new toads are being born every single year, each one carrying enough poison to kill the native animals desperately trying to survive alongside them. The toads have now conquered nearly 500,000 square miles of Australia, an area larger than many countries, and they show absolutely no signs of stopping. Every year, the invasion front pushes further west, further south, and swallowing more pristine wilderness into its toxic embrace. But if the invasion was bad enough already, what scientists discovered next made everything exponentially worse. The toads were not staying the same. They were changing, evolving, becoming something even more dangerous than the creatures that first hopped off those ships in 1935. Australian cane toads are no longer the same animals that were originally imported. They have transformed into something new, something terrifying, something that seems almost purpose-built for conquest. A groundbreaking study from 2015 revealed that the poison glands on Australian cane toads have grown significantly larger than those of their South American ancestors. The concentration of toxins in their skin is now approximately 50% higher than the original population. And these toads are literally becoming more deadly with each passing generation, as if the harsh Australian environment is actively selecting for the most lethal individuals. The weak ones die, the strong ones breed, and each new generation emerges more toxic than the last. The physical changes go far beyond just their poison. Between 2018 and 2022, researchers documented evolutionary changes occurring 5 to 10 times faster than normal. The toads on the invasion front, the pioneers spreading into new territory, have developed legs that are 6% longer than their predecessors. Their muscles are denser and more powerful. Their livers are larger, better able to process the stress of constant movement. They can travel further, faster, without getting tired or stressed. In the 1940s, a cane toad might move about 5 miles in a year. By 2010, the fastest individuals were covering 47 miles annually. They are spreading faster than the width of a small country every single year. The toads on the leading edge of the invasion have essentially become a new breed entirely, supercharged versions of the original invaders built from the ground up for conquest. Engineering a predator. And the native animals are changing too, but not fast enough. Some lizards have given up hunting large prey entirely.
Nile monitor lizards are creating some problems. The city has had to set up several traps to try to catch these giant lizards. One of those lizards actually ate her cat, so people who live in the area and have pets are frightened.
Switching to a diet of only small insects because they cannot risk biting something that might be a toad. Some native mammals have even evolved smaller heads over multiple generations, physically making themselves incapable of fitting an adult cane toad in their mouths. The entire ecosystem is warping itself around these invaders, and not always successfully. And this is where the story takes a turn that sounds like it belongs in a science fiction novel. Traditional methods were failing. You cannot catch 200 million toads by hand. Traps barely made a dent in the population. Poisoning them would kill everything else too. Scientists needed something radical, something that would attack the toads at their most vulnerable stage, something that would turn their own biology against them. Enter Professor Rick Shine and a team of genetic engineers with a truly wild idea. What if you could create a toad that never grows up? A perpetual tadpole, trapped forever in its juvenile form, driven by one overwhelming instinct: to eat the eggs of its own species. They called it the Peter Pan Project, and the science behind it is both elegant and terrifying. Normally, a tadpole transforms into a toad when its body produces a specific hormone, essentially a biological switch that triggers metamorphosis. Using CRISPR, the revolutionary gene editing tool, scientists found a way to permanently disable that switch. No hormone means no transformation. The tadpole stays in the water forever, never developing legs, never losing its tail, never hopping onto land. But here is where it gets interesting. Without the pressure to transform quickly, these Peter Pan tadpoles grow much larger and live much longer than normal ones. A regular tadpole only survives about 20 days before becoming a toad. The modified versions live for over 100 days. They grow 3 times larger than their natural counterparts. And because Australian cane-toed tadpoles already have aggressive cannibalistic tendencies, and these enlarged, long-lived versions become absolute eating machines. A single Peter Pan tadpole can eat 35,000 eggs in its lifetime. Compare that to a normal tadpole, which might consume only 5,000 eggs during its brief existence. These genetic modifications essentially created the perfect biological weapon, a creature that does nothing but patrol ponds and destroy the next generation of toads before they ever get the chance to hatch. The data from controlled experiments has been nothing short of remarkable. In test ponds, just a handful of Peter Pan tadpoles were able to completely clear out entire batches of eggs. When a female toad lays her 30,000 eggs in a pond containing these modified cannibals, virtually none of those eggs survive to hatch. The reproductive cycle gets shattered before it even begins. There is an elegance to this approach that makes it particularly appealing to conservationists. Because the Peter Pan tadpoles never mature, they never leave the water. They cannot spread into new environments the way adult toads can. They cannot reproduce because they never reach sexual maturity. They are essentially self-limiting weapons, destined to die in the same ponds where they were placed, taking countless toad eggs with them. Nature's tiny assassins. The plan is to eventually release these genetic guardians into ponds across northern Australia, creating a network of permanent sentinels that would devour every new batch of eggs that adult toads try to lay. Scientists envision a future where every water source in the invasion zone contains a few of these modified tadpoles, and making successful reproduction nearly impossible for the invading species. But the researchers are moving carefully. They understand better than anyone the dangers of releasing genetically modified organisms into the wild. Tests showed that while the Peter Pan tadpoles were highly effective at eating cane toad eggs, they occasionally consumed the eggs of native species too. The rate was low, but it was not zero. Nobody wants to solve one ecological disaster by creating another. While the genetic scientists work on perfecting their laboratory-created cannibals, another weapon has already been deployed in the field, and it comes from an unexpected source that has been hiding in plain sight for millions of years: native meat ants. These are not the small, harmless insects you might find crawling across your kitchen counter looking for crumbs. Australian meat ants are something else entirely. They are aggressive, relentless, colony-building predators that construct super colonies stretching across hundreds of yards. A single colony can contain hundreds of thousands of individuals, all working together with a level of coordination that borders on terrifying. They attack anything that moves, and they do it with brutal efficiency. Scientists studying cane toads discovered something remarkable. There is a brief window in the toad's life cycle when it is incredibly vulnerable. Right after a tadpole completes its transformation and crawls out of the water as a tiny toad, it enters what researchers call the metamorph stage. During this critical period, the young toad is soft, slow, and about the size of a fingernail. Its skin has not yet hardened. Its legs are still weak. Its reflexes are sluggish. For a few crucial hours, it is essentially defenseless, trapped between the water it just left and the land it has not yet learned to navigate. This is the moment when the meat ants strike. In controlled experiments, researchers placed recently transformed toadlets near active meat ant nests. The results were devastating and immediate. The ants detected the young toads within seconds and attacked with coordinated precision. Thousands of tiny bodies swarmed over the helpless toadlets, biting into their soft flesh, injecting formic acid, and dragging them away piece by piece before the toads could even take their first hop into the grass. Up to 98% of the young toads were killed within minutes. The killing efficiency was almost industrial in its completeness. What makes this even more remarkable is that the ants seem to be largely immune to the toad's infamous poison. While a dog or a large lizard would die in agony from trying to eat an adult cane toad, these tiny ants rip into the toxic creatures without any apparent ill effects. Scientists believe the ants may be too small to absorb a lethal dose, or they may have developed some natural resistance over time. And crucially, native frogs seem to be much safer around the ant colonies. Having evolved alongside meat ants for thousands of years, Australian frogs have developed the speed and alertness needed to escape. The cane toads, being recent invaders with no evolutionary history on this continent, have no such survival instincts. They sit frozen while the ants overwhelm them. The rangers across northern Australia are now weaponizing this natural relationship. They use simple bait like cat food and pieces of meat to draw ant colonies closer to water sources where toads breed. By positioning these baits strategically along the shoreline, they create walls of hungry ants exactly where young toads are forced to emerge from the water. What was once a peaceful pond becomes a gauntlet of death for the invading species. The toads have no choice but to leave the water, and the ants are waiting. It is nature's own frontline defense, deployed with military precision. The last line of defense. There is one more weapon in this war, and it might be the most ambitious of them all. While scientists battle the toads with genetic engineering and ant armies, another team is working on something far simpler, but potentially far more powerful, turning the Australian desert itself into an impassable death trap. The concept is built on one simple fact that the toads cannot escape. Cane toads are amphibians, and amphibians cannot survive without water. In the scorching arid regions of Australia, where temperatures can climb above 40 degrees Celsius and rain might not fall for months, a toad will die of dehydration in just 2 or 3 days if it cannot find moisture.
Hidden underground, the desert's own Rip Van Winkle waits for his moment. Badefoot toad lies in suspended animation under the soil until it hears the welcome drumbeat of the raindrops on the desert floor.
This biological weakness has given scientists an extraordinary idea. What if you could weaponize the desert itself? The project is called the Dry Shield, and it represents an $18 million gamble to create a barrier of death stretching across the Australian outback. The concept is elegant in its simplicity. For decades, and cattle stations across the remote Kimberley region have relied on artificial water sources to keep their livestock alive. Troughs, tanks, dams, and bore pumps dot the landscape, creating a network of oases in an otherwise hostile environment. The toads have been exploiting these water sources to hopscotch across territory that should have been impossible for them to cross. Each artificial water point becomes a stepping stone, allowing the invasion to push deeper into regions that would have stopped them naturally. The Dry Shield project aims to eliminate this advantage. Teams of workers are systematically modifying or relocating water sources throughout the region. Cattle troughs are being fitted with covers and raised platforms that allow cows to drink but prevent toads from climbing in. Underground tanks are replacing open ponds. Water points are being strategically repositioned to create gaps too wide for any toad to cross before dehydration sets in. The goal is to transform the desert from a series of survivable hops into one continuous death sentence for any toad trying to push westward. The stakes behind this project are monumental. The target is to establish a containment line stretching approximately 150 miles across some of the most remote and rugged terrain in Australia. If this barrier holds, it could protect the last unspoiled wilderness areas in the entire country, places where the cane toads have not yet reached and where unique species still thrive without the threat of toxic invaders. The project is scheduled for completion by 2028. And it represents the largest coordinated physical effort to block the toad invasion since those first 102 toads were released nearly 90 years ago. The financial cost of this war has already reached staggering proportions. Experts estimate that the damage caused by cane toads has exceeded $2 billion and continues to climb every year. This figure includes the desperate efforts to save endangered species from extinction, the collapse of tourism revenue as visitors realize the wildlife they came to see has vanished, and the ripple effects on industries like mining that operate in affected regions. But the real cost of this invasion can never be measured in dollars. Species that took millions of years to evolve are being erased in mere decades. The freshwater crocodiles that ruled northern rivers since the time of dinosaurs are dying in numbers never seen before. The monitor lizards that once dominated the landscape have nearly disappeared from entire regions. Birds, mammals, and reptiles found nowhere else on Earth are sliding toward extinction because of an animal that never should have set foot on this continent. The cane toad population now outnumbers the human population of Australia by nearly 8 to 1. They are 20 times more numerous than every koala left alive in the world. And every year, they spread further, grow more toxic, and become harder to stop. The dry shield might be humanity's last chance to draw a line in the sand and say, no further. This is not a clean victory, and it's not a simple war. It's a live experiment unfolding in real time, where every breakthrough carries a risk and every delay carries a cost. Australia has chosen to fight evolution with engineering, to answer one mistake with another, more deliberate one. The lines between conservation, control, and consequence are blurring, and no one knows where they will finally settle. The toads are still advancing, the science is still evolving, and the outcome is still undecided. So the question remains, when humanity reshapes nature to save it, are we preventing a catastrophe or quietly writing the opening chapter of the next one?